Last week, a federal judge in Texas issued a preliminary injunction against the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's new rules that would prohibit credit card companies from charging more than $8 for late fees. The new rule was set to go into effect today. So when announced, the Bureau estimated that the new rule would save consumers more than $10 billion in late fees per year. So what was the basis for the court blocking the new rule, and what could it mean for consumers? Here to discuss it all, we have attorney Matthew Hoffman with Battle-Born Injury Lawyers with us today. Thank you so much for joining us. You know, at first blush, you hear about this and consumers are like, yay, but there's a problem. Yeah,
there's a problem. So this whole thing arises, this Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was created after the housing collapse. It was part of the Dodd-Frank Act. And what they do is they went in and they're in charge of overseeing banks, lending institutions, credit bureaus, things like that. And they went in and they took a hard look at the major credit card companies and late fees. And what they found is that in 2022, the major credit card companies, 10% of their gross revenue was based solely on late fees. That's like $14 billion
wow.
that they were making off late fees. And they said, well, that seems excessive. So why is this happening? So they looked back. In 2009, the credit card companies were told you can't charge more than $25 for a late fee the first time, not more than $35 after. But you can index it to inflation. And so now all these years later, 15 years later, the average is around $30 for one late charge, $40 plus for the secondary late charges. So they said, okay, that's just too much. There's no way it costs the banks that much to, through collections and whatnot. And so they said, we're going to issue a new rule that says it's $8. That's the most you can charge unless you can provide to us math. Show us the math that it actually costs more and will allow you to charge more. So they come in, they issued this new ruling. It's set to go into effect. They announced it in March, and then the court late last week blocked it.
Because it said basically that they found there's an issue with the funding to begin with, right?
Yeah, so the way it works is this. The basis of the ruling, this isn't a judge looking at it saying, hey, you can't block these late charges. It's more that the Chamber of Commerce came in, filed a lawsuit seeking an injunction, and the court, after finally reviewing it, said, look, the Fifth Circuit, which we're in Texas, they ruled 2 years ago that this bureau, the way it was set up, its funding doesn't come from Congress. It's part of the executive branch. It's supposed to get funding from Congress. Instead, it's set up where it's basically self-funded by the Federal Reserve. Every year, they just go to the Federal Reserve and say, hey, we need $100 million for this year to do our activities, and they write them a check. And the Fifth Circuit in 2022 said that's unconstitutional. That violates separation of powers. You can't, in appropriations, it's unconstitutional, you can't do it. And any rules that were created by you using that funding that's unconstitutional can't go into effect. So the court just quickly said, look, this was already ruled upon by the Fifth Circuit. It's pending before the Supreme Court. I have to grant the injunction. And that's what happened. The only way this will change is if the Supreme Court reverses the Fifth Circuit, which based on the current makeup of the court, they're very hostile to these independent agencies. I don't see them reversing it. So nice try, but I think everyone's got to pay their bills on time. You're not going to get $8 late charges.
All right, you might have to do the big B word, budget, because it sounds like they're not going to help you out with that. Thank you so much for breaking down the law with us. And if you have a legal question that you want Matt to answer, please email us at breakingdownthelaw@news3lv.com.